and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into a beer from Anchorage Brewing Company out of Anchorage, Alaska, of course. This one I did get from Tavour, and the beer in question today is another really big one. This beer is called Blessed, and it's an Imperial Stout that clocks in at 16.5% ABV. This is a blend of 1 and 2 year old stouts. It has been bourbon barrel aged. They also aged it on Madagascar vanilla and raw toasted coconut. So another big Imperial Stout here. You'll notice that I said nothing about there being lactose in here, so I'm not expecting this to be sweet. I'm expecting it to lead with a big, rich, roasty underpinning of malt roastiness that Anchorage is known for. The label art on this one is really, really cool, though it's easily the most distinguishable Anchorage label I've seen because it's sideways and it's just solid black with gold foil. So I'm going to try to gently rotate this way. It's got their typical kind of skeleton. He's got a crown on, sitting in a lord's robe. So very, very cool. I didn't want to tilt that too far because I didn't want to agitate this beer and have it go everywhere when I open it. As always, the trusty pointy end of our bottle opener to get right under the edge of the cap and cut through this wax. Anchorage wax is normally reasonably straightforward to get off. In fact, that just came right off. That's perfect. One big clean piece. We'll take the cap off. It's not blowing up all over my table. Perfect. All right. So we're going to get it poured right in our trusty stout glass. Oh, very dark, very thick. Without it sloshing all over my table, I'm trying to give it agitation, but I don't expect this to do much in the head department. It's super active in carbonation. I can hear it. I can see it. Yep. I mean, it just collapsed from underneath before it ever had a chance to form. So really not much to say about the head and retention. It didn't form one and it didn't retain one. It is what it is. I still expect this will be a delicious beer. So let's get right up over this. Give it a sniff. Oh, wow. That's pungent. You can really smell the bourbon and the coconut on this in particular. There is coconut on the nose. So everything that they added to this beer smells really nice. The bourbon barrel aging, very, very clear and present. The vanilla, very clear and present. And the coconut, which is not often that you get the aroma of coconut on the beer, but you can in this one. Now, another thing I can tell you, and this is probably the primary reason for the lack of a head, coconut is an ingredient with obviously a ton of natural oils, and oil and beer head do not mix. And indeed, I can see a nice little layer of coconut oil bits floating on top. No matter how they process this, something like that with the added coconut is really not going to have a chance, especially in the volume I'm sure that they used, to do much there. But it is packing a ton of aroma into this beer. I expect it to do the same for the flavor. Visually, absolutely jet black as expected. So let's just jump right in, take a sip, and see what this one's about. Oh, that's huge. Huge, 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 huge. Okay, so it seems every time that I have a sip of a new stout from Anchorage, I'm immediately, the first place that my brain goes to is they are essentially unmatched for my money in the stouts game. I mean, they are cleanly my favorite brewer in the country. They have been for the last few years. It seems like they put out nothing but winners. And I am particularly fond of their stouts. And this is just another decadent one, guys. It's big. It was not cheap. If I recall correctly, this might have been anywhere from $40 to $80 for the bottle. It's a big, big beer that took a lot of time to make, expensive ingredients. It is what it is. I know that may put some people off, but you know, you set aside a rainy day fund for some of these big once in a while or once a year beers that you want to grab. It's always worth keeping Anchorage's stouts. They're really big stouts on your list. I mean, they are just so good. If you're a stout fan, if you've never had one, you absolutely owe it to yourself to do what you can to get your hands on them. Tavour, Craft Shack, maybe a few other places if you're lucky enough to live in Alaska. But whatever you got to do, I do highly recommend it. So this is a big, big beer. packed full of flavor. So much so, in fact, that I wasn't even thinking about the body and mouthfeel on that first sip. So I'm going to jump back in for a second sip. Right now, we'll jump straight to the body and the mouthfeel, and then we'll pick apart this flavor profile, talk about the balance and the finish. We'll just hit it all after a second sip. But first impression, it is absolutely delicious. Just another home run from Anchorage. So take two. Here we go. Yeah, this is a big boy. It's got a nice weighty body, very, very resistant mouthfeel. This does not get creamy or velvety or foamy when you agitate, but you can really feel that resistance. So the body and the mouthfeel both really match this sky-high ABV as you would expect. What you expect is what you get. In terms of the flavor profile, the very first thing that you get up front is actually the underlying roastiness. It is intense and it just comes whooshing up front. Immediately behind that, the bourbon barrel opens up. That's the first two things you notice, and it's a very complex, very roasty malt bill underneath on this one. There's a lot of notes of char, there's notes of cacao, notes of coffee. It's just huge. Very big undercurrents of very dark, like blackstrap molasses. This is a big, rich, roasty malt bill. The bourbon barrel comes through very, very clearly, tastes distinctly of bourbon, nice spirit sensation to it, slight warming on this, but not over the top. And there's really, out of the bourbon on this, it would be tough for me to say if what I'm tasting are other barrel elements, just based on the nature of the malt bill. Plus, it's got the added vanilla, but it's classic molasses, vanilla, kind of brown sugar, caramelization notes coming out of it. It's absolutely fantastic. Then, almost immediately behind that, in tandem, you get vanilla and you get coconut. And the vanilla in this is very, very nice. It's an ingredient that I think far too often people go a bit ham-fisted with it because it is a pungent ingredient. And also, if you're using whole Madagascar vanilla bean, it's also a very expensive ingredient. So, you know, that price point coupled with the pungency of the ingredient, you know, a deft hand is best in my opinion, and they absolutely nailed it here. And the coconut, I talk about this often when we're talking beers with coconut. It's an ingredient that I love if it's done right, but it's also a trickier additive because so many coconut beers, something about the timing, the step, the process, whatever type of coconut they used, something in there can lead to these off kind of funky flavors. Nothing like that in this beer at all. It is just pure stout bliss in a glass. It's absolutely fantastic. It is a mammoth beer. Mammoth beer. So when we're talking specifically the balance, a beer like this, kind of everything but the kitchen sink, it's one of those that it's got a lot of parts and independent moving parts at that they had to get just right. And as I have come to know and expect from Anchorage, they did just that. The balance on this is spot on. I am most impressed in this beer. Gosh, it's tough to say, but from just a personal perspective, I am most impressed by this malt bill. The fact that it's so forward, so layered with complexity, and just so full and in your face. It is the foundation for everything else they did with this beer. I really like when a beer that's barrel-aged, has all these other big additives, that the malt bill speaks to me first. It is an Imperial Stout after all. The barrel's absolutely fantastic. Not much to say there. I mean, they're doing their job. They work beautifully with this base beer, blended beer at that. The vanilla, perfect balance. The coconut, perfectly executed, perfect balance. I mean, there's nothing I would change about it. I think they absolutely nailed it yet again. In terms of the finish, perhaps you would already anticipate this, and if you did, you would be correct. It's quite long. This is a big, bold, flavor-forward beer. Just as pungent as that aroma is, the flavor is pungent, and it really does linger on the palate. It's really a combination of lingering three flavors that I'm left with. It's the bourbon barrel, it's the vanilla, and it's the underlying malt bill itself. And I kind of am coming full circle because I want to hit back on this malt bill again. Aside from really doing a great job and making massive presence and being a fundamentally great foundation upon which to build this beer, there's actually a fair bit of earthy, roasted malt bitters that you get up front on this as well. It's not IPA territory, but for a big boozy Imperial Stout like this, it's noticeable, and I absolutely love it for that. It punches straight through and you're like, yep, no lactose in this one. It's just a big, bold, ham-fisted Imperial Stout that's been balanced beautifully. Guys, this is another winner from Anchorage. I am going to take my time, sip on this one, count my scores. When we come back, we will get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Anchorage Brewing Company's Blessed, a blended Imperial Stout that was a blend of both 1- and 2-year-old Imperial Stouts that was then bourbon barrel aged on top of Madagascar vanilla and toasted raw coconut. Anchorage Brewing, of course, based in Anchorage, Alaska. This one did clock in at a massive 16.5% ABV. Okay, guys, so I feel like a broken record by this time, but if this doesn't literally set the point here that I try to make every time I have an Anchorage Stout in particular, guys, they are the top of the game. Do what you got to do to get your hands on them. I got mine from Tavour. You can also get the beers on Craft Shack now. So you've got a couple different avenues if you don't live in or around the state of Alaska. Absolutely worth it. They're big beers like this tend to come at a premium price tag, but you know, it is what it is. Just set, $10 a week aside, a few times a year. Then you got a pile of a few hundred to go for some of these big, expensive special beers. Absolutely worth it, in my opinion. Nonetheless, we're going to jump right into this one. This, like so many as of late, has been extremely good. Indeed, it almost swept it. There was a single category where it did not get a perfect 10, and you could probably already guess it is indeed the head and retention. Look, it is what it is. It's a big, thick stout. It was very effervescent. On top of that, the coconut oil. So it had a lot of things going against it for being poured at home. So it really did a bad job at attempting to form a head and at retaining one. I give it a 1. I easily could have given it a 0, but it tried. It is what it is. So I gave the head and retention a 1 out of 10, but that does leave a perfect 10 out of 10 in the remaining 9 categories. That's aroma, taste, body, mouthfeel, finish, appearance, balance, feeling, and intangible, my subjective thoughts category, and finally, example of style. So the total score on Anchorage Brewing Company's Blessed is a 91 out of 100. Guys, okay, look, it lost 9 points. It lost them in a category that frankly doesn't matter that much. The aroma serves the purpose. The head and retention serves the purpose primarily of aroma. This was a big, bold, very aromatic, pungently so, beer. The fact that it didn't make a head or retain any had no bearing on the beer drinking experience at all. So as far as I'm concerned, this was about a near perfect beer. But I had to rank it how I experienced it. So be that as it may, that's my thoughts. Just another world-class stout done by the absolute stout masters at Anchorage. Gabe Fletcher, you just keep putting them out. We're going to keep buying them and enjoying every last drop. Folks, that is today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just hit the bell icon, turn on your notifications. It is right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.